Hello, this is the Wizard of Pause, Richard Halter, presenting to you this video on an overview of how to derive microservices from the retail business process model. The current retail model is quite a mess, as you can see here on the left. So how do you move to the more agile model on the right? In the agile model, all of the applications are independent of each other, and all you have to do is basically plug them together to make them work. The beauty of this is you get to upgrade by simply replacing an application without worrying about its impact on the rest of the ecosystem. When designing business software, we should remind ourselves that the objective is delivering an agile system in support of the business. And so how do we get there? Well, first we have to define what is the goal of our business, right? And from there, we define the business model that we want to follow. From there, we identify value streams, which are particular processes that are designed to support that specific business model. We then build an architectural model, which is comprised of the value streams followed by the capabilities. What is the capability of each value stream? From there, we put together a business process model with the primary focus on creating this value through this value stream. We use the enterprise architecture or the information, the low-level data, and we build an information model. And then finally, we build a sets of microservices that we need to support that information model. And as you can see, it will directly tie right back up to the business goal. So when we talk about microservice components, the microservice is the implementation of the agile model. And basically it starts with a service, which is in effect an application. The application is put into a container, and that container we can now put anywhere. This is where it gives us the plug and play capability. And then finally, it's got an API interface that is clearly defined so that other systems can easily interface to this microservice. So let's look at the microservice model in action. So first, it starts with the microservice itself. It gets put inside of the container. And if you have two microservices that need some close connectivity for some reason, you can put those into another container called a pod, in which case both of those get put together. Then you have the data model, which is a key component of the microservices world, so that all of the things talk the same languages. Has a registry which locates where this instance of that microservice gets stored. And then if there's any sort of translation that occurs, there's a translator microservice for managing that. Now you want to ideally minimize this by using standard API interfaces. So we have all these microservice applications. How do we derive those from the business itself? The value streams we talked about earlier. Well, here's a business process model at level 0. I have it in my tool. It is available at the OMG website. It was built by quite a number of very important people in the retail world. But we're going to focus in on the managed sales process. So as you drill down into the business process model down to level 1 and look at the sales processes, you can see that I've identified quite a different number of them. In my tool, I've also have them cross-connected to other areas, but we're not talking about that at this point. So we're going to pick one of these. Let's pick the process sales transaction process. So we drill down into the process sales transaction and we run into this sets of swim lanes of managing a particular sales transaction. Now the focus of this is not the business process model, but to show you how you can identify microservices from this model. And so we will now look at an area here that is a potential microservice. So these things here might be able to be combined into a microservice that we could put into its own pod and put it somewhere in its own container. So let's drill down into that highlighted area, and we'll see that there's really two different things going on. So we have the authorized access and the lookup an item. So those are probably two different microservices. So let's focus on the one on the right, the item lookup. And so that's the business function we want to perform inside of this microservice. That's the database. Now the database can be inside this particular microservice if it's just for this service, or it could be put out into the a microservice of its own. We have the standard interface as defined by the Retail Standards Group, and together that all forms a microservice lookup service. One of the challenges of the microservices world is the API definition itself. And one of the beauties of the Retail Standards Group is that most of these interface standards are already defined. You will find that they have got almost 80 to 90% of the interfaces in the operational side in existence today. On top of that, they've got device interface standards for all of the various devices. So now you've got the ability to do the plug and play model. But wait, there's more. They have the data model. They've got a data model that has an extensive amount of information. So a couple of the major components of a microservices world already exist for you today. Now, we're going to take a look down into the item maintenance schema services. So in the item services area, there are three microservice interfaces already defined. There's an item update service, an item recall service, and an item lookup service. In control theory, closed-loop architectures are inherently stable. That is, they adjust on the fly to changes in the system. This keeps the system in balance and quickly reacts to whatever happens. This is the heart of the interactive virtual unified retail model I've created. This model is based on the knowledge I've gathered from over 1,450 subject matter experts over 20 years. A key component of this model is the connection between the business strategy down to the people, processes, and information, with feedback being driven by the business intelligence. One important component is the value streams identified in the business architecture area. These value streams help focus the business on what it takes to implement the strategy. Now, in the strategy area, there are 11 business strategy groupings. In the business architecture area, there are two components. One is the value stream, and there's 26 value stream groupings. And underneath those, there are capabilities to support the various value streams, and there are over 35 capability map groupings in this. When you move around to the business process area, this is one business process that covers the whole retail business. You move on around to the business organization, and this is basically the org chart that ties the people who need to execute the processes to support the value stream that manages the business strategy. And we move on around to the enterprise architecture, and this is where the information is. In this area, there's over 9 blueprints, or basically a statement of work for building those various pieces. There are 14 groups of engineering drawings, like life cycle drawings, timing diagrams, etc. There are 29 interface definitions for connecting all of this stuff up, and these are critical when you move on into the microservices architecture we'll talk about in a second. On top of that, there are over 40 physical devices that can be directly connected to this. Using this model, you'll be able to swap one device for another, one printer from one manufacturer with a printer from another manufacturer without an enormous amount of effort. In here, there's one huge data model with over 8,000 attributes. I would say roughly 80 to 90% of the operational side of the business is covered in this data model. Then to tie it back into the business intelligence area we'll talk about in a second, there was one data warehouse with 2 data marts, and those are all connected to the various KPIs in the business intelligence area. Then there are 20 RFPs to help purchase various applications. So we move around to the business intelligence area, and in there we have 20 KPI groupings that finally link back to the strategy to make sure that we are executing the proper value stream and monitoring it correctly. Those who fail to study history are bound to repeat it. The modern API revolution is taking us back to the pre-1994 world where everybody's going to create an API. They think they have the absolute best one. And what will happen is somebody's going to have to write a translation from their API to somebody else's API. And we're back to the mess that started the creation of arts. It's much better to leverage the existing material that is out there than it is to go create your own new set, thinking that you know better. So thank you for listening to this. My name's Richard Halter. I have a YouTube channel out there where this was posted. I've got a blog as well at globalretailtechnologyadvisors.com. I have a couple of courses. One is a self-paced course talking about the microservices architecture and all of the components that you need to make it work. There's also a course on POS log, which is the lifeblood of retail. Point of sale information is used in virtually every application there is in retail. So thank you for listening. Oh, by the way, I've written a book as well called Arts for Retail, which gives you a good insight into how all of this stuff fits together.